There's Catherine. Oh, and our first attendee.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Welcome to everyone who's showing up. We'll be starting the webinar in just about 4 minutes.
Did you turn off the video for everyone, Tim?
No, we're all going to have our video on at the beginning. And after I get to the agenda, you can shut it off. Welcome everyone who's joined so far. We'll be starting the webinar in just about 2 minutes.
Morning.
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 Good morning.
Good morning.
Just about 1 minute to go before we start our webinar. Last chance to grab that cup of coffee. All right, I can see our participants dropping in. We're at the top of the hour. Really happy to see everybody who's attending this very select session on a very special webinar on low-no funding through the FTA's low-no program and how to leverage that program to finance your fuel cell electric buses. Really happy to put this webinar on along with our co-sponsors at New Flyer, Eldorado National, Air Liquide, and KTC. This is going to be an exciting presentation for the transit agencies that are really looking forward to electrifying their fleets, to decarbonizing, to getting to zero emission buses. And we want to show all the advantages for fuel cell electric buses, many of which you already know. And most importantly, how to get your low-no application best prepared to maximize your chance to win an award to get your fuel cell fleet underway or expand your fleet as it's already going. We're going to cover a lot of ground today. We'll start off with the growth and the value proposition for fuel cell electric buses. We'll go quickly over what we've seen in the field so far in this area and how it can help your fleets out as you grow in zero emission space. Commercial fuel cell bus offerings will be reviewed by the two dominant fuel cell electric bus manufacturers in the US and Canada, Eldorado National Company and New Flyer. And we'll get into hydrogen fuel and the infrastructure that you're going to need to get your buses fueled up, all the different options from our experts at Air Liquide. Very interesting topic indeed. And most importantly, Sydney Kruger will be talking with us about how to apply for low-no funding through the FTA, what the process is like, and how really to maximize your chances for success to win those awards. And we'll finish up with some Q&A. And I invite everyone to put your questions into the chat as we go down. And once we get to the Q&A section, we'll also have the opportunity for live dialogue. We've made an effort to really keep a select audience, to keep a conversation alive so that we can have a back and forth exchange. And we look forward to your input as we go through here. I'll ask my panel now to mute their microphones. If everyone could please mute their microphones as well. And we'll talk about who we're going to see today. As I mentioned, I'm Tim Sessine. I'm with Ballard Power Systems. And we'll be hearing from Oscar Pardinas at Eldorado National Company. He's the regional sales manager for the West for Eldorado. Also, Dan Trujillo from New Flyer, also the regional sales manager for New Flyer. Jordan Truitt will join us from Air Liquide. He's going to talk to us about the fuel and the fueling infrastructure. He's their business development manager for hydrogen energy. And to cap it all off will be Sydney Kruger from KTC and representative for Ballard. She'll be talking about all the different ins and outs of the fuel cell bus application and for low-no and for FTA, and then we'll get right into our Q&A as promised. So let's talk about why we're all here. The value proposition for hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. There are two kinds of electric buses, both battery and hydrogen fuel cell. And depending on your operations, your fleet size, and your needs, one may be more appropriate than the other. However, fuel cell electric buses really can offer a direct one-to-one replacement for your diesel or CNG buses route for route across all operating regimes and across all climate conditions, both hot weather and cold weather, giving you the energy that you need to provide your passengers with maximum comfort and to get them to their destinations. The increased energy capacity that is allowed by hydrogen storage on board, along supplemented with the battery pack, can increase the range. And we're seeing excellent results in the field these days with really good fuel economy and the ability to make those routes, whether they're urban routes or long highway routes, to suit the needs of your agency. And rapid refueling makes the whole picture possible. It keeps your operations running in the way that you want them to run with comparable refueling time to both diesel and CNG. Fuel cell buses are gaining great popularity across the world, not only in the US with now 64 buses out in the world and 49 approaching 50 now that are powered by Ballard, but also in Europe, a huge uptake in fuel cell electric buses. We've got well over 100 deployed now, and there are hundreds to come as more and more cities come on board as hydrogen is incorporated into Europe's decarbonization strategy, and the European countries find the use of hydrogen buses keep their operations going. In Asia, we see, as we've seen in other renewable energy trends, an order of magnitude higher with uptake of fuel cell electric buses now in the thousands. In the United States, which is what we're focused on today, fuel cell buses are spreading across the country. We've got multiple deployments here shown by the stars in Michigan, Flint, Michigan, proud runner of fuel cell electric buses. Ohio, SARTA, a real banner operation, a longtime supporter of fuel cell electric buses, and an ever expanding fleet there, proving out their usage in cold weather. Illinois also coming online with their fuel cell electric buses, articulated buses in this case. And we're seeing interest all across the states. South Carolina expressing serious interest in bringing on some fuel cell electric buses, along with ongoing conversations in Florida and Texas, Colorado, Utah, Oregon, Washington, and lots of policy support as well. That fuel is an important part of the picture, as Jordan's going to tell us, and we're seeing a lot of positive policy movement to get that fuel out in a zero carbon form and get it readily available for fuel cell electric bus fleets. Nevada, an exciting story in Las Vegas as they bring on their 2 new Flyer buses soon to come online. And of course, California, the long home of fuel cell electric buses from over 2 decades in the making. We see deployments in 4 different locations, up at in Oakland at AC Transit, down in Orange County at OCTA, and of course, Sunline, longtime supporter of fuel cell electric buses, and as well as at UC Irvine. And the story with California really goes deeper. There's a reason why you see so many fuel cell electric bus deployments there and an ever expanding number of agencies coming online. California has been very forward-looking and assertive with their innovative clean transit regulation, which mandates that all buses be zero emission buses by 2040. And that means by 2029, they're purchasing nothing but zero emission buses. And part of that regulation means setting up a plan, putting the rollout plans out there and contacting third-party engineering firms to do that evaluation. As these evaluations have gotten done, they've looked at battery electric and fuel cell electric buses with the latest information from the latest deployments. And what we're seeing from these plans, from these rollout plans, is that at least a quarter and up to a half of all of these buses, by the time the regulation comes into full effect, will be fuel cell electric buses. That means something like 1,500 to over 6,500 buses will be deployed as fuel cell electric buses in California, meaning that renewable hydrogen will also be out in something like 38 to 163 tons per day. Those numbers are very encouraging for the rest of transit, because that means we have the opportunity to continually decrease cost, keep availability high, and keep the resources available to you to keep your operations in the way that you like them running. Buses powered by Ballard number over 1,000 globally. And there's multiple platforms, not only in the US, but in Europe. We have several manufacturers that keep bringing new fuel cell platforms to market, not only 40-foot or 12-meter, but also the longer articulated buses. And we're seeing now double-decker buses and shuttle buses. And we've got a huge amount of road experience under our belt, over 25 million kilometers in service. And the fuel cells are showing that they have the lifetimes to back up heavy duty transit operation. Over 30,000 hours have been demonstrated on these buses in the field. It's the adaptability of the fuel cell powertrain that makes it so powerful. It's a hybrid system. You can think of it as an onboard charging system for your battery pack that you carry around with you. It's been optimized for the vehicle performance, both in idling, in highway performance, and in around town stop and go traffic. The higher energy density means longer routes, and heavier payloads and higher loads from air conditioning, from heating, can be afforded while maintaining your operational capability. And the scalable infrastructure allows you to rapidly deploy more buses and scale up along with your zero emission mandates. Hydrogen is becoming more and more widely available today, and renewable hydrogen is rapidly becoming the fuel of choice as its price decreases and as new production facilities come online. We've seen some excellent results, and many thanks to the folks out at Foothill Transit. I see Roland Cordero is joining us today. They did a study comparing a demonstration fleet of 20 fuel cell buses compared to 32 battery electric buses for completing particular routes there, and saw that potential savings were significant, close to $13 million when you consider a savings in CapEx of the buses from a fewer number of buses needed in order to accomplish all the routes that are needed for daily service, from decreased cost For refurbishment, fuel cells offer excellent recyclability, with plates getting reused and platinum getting recycled over 97%. And for the fueling infrastructure, as you get up to more and more buses in your fleet, marginal costs for fuel decrease with additional buses. And that can be really powerful, particularly for constrained fleets and fleets that have to grow to quite big sizes with many buses in a single depot. So really happy that all of you could join us and we can talk further about these benefits, and let's get into the specific buses. First up, we're going to talk with Oscar Pardinas from Eldorado National Company and find out about their fuel cell electric bus offerings. Oscar, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Tim, I lost the screen. There we go. Okay, so Eldorado got into the fuel cell arena actually as part of the American Fuel Cell Bus Project, which was sponsored by FTA. It was a partnership between Eldorado, Ballard, BAE Systems, and Sunline. And as a result of that development and the many industry improvements over the years, we're now at this particular model, the battery dominant fuel cell bus. As Tim mentioned, fuel cell buses are another electric bus. They also carry batteries. The fuel cell charges the batteries and powers the bus. All of our buses are built on a 304 stainless monocoque cage with composite materials. Instead of carrying a 6,000 pound battery payload, we carry that fuel the fuel is carried in tanks as hydrogen with an equivalent of somewhere near 1,000 kilowatts in a 60 kilogram hydrogen load. The hydrogen bus, one of the neat things about it is you don't have to do a whole lot of change to your infrastructure. It fuels very quickly like a CNG or a diesel bus. You don't have to tether your bus to a charger in your yard. You can park it anywhere. So minimizes disruption to your operation. I think Tim showed a slide where you saw the capital cost of buses and infrastructure being higher for fuel cells than it is for battery electric bus. And this is true for your initial investment. However, over time, for every electric bus you buy, you got to buy a charger. And then eventually you're going to need more power coming into your facility. Whereas if you're fueling a hydrogen bus, one dispenser or a couple of dispensers could fuel 5 buses or 50 buses. So again, minimal disruption. We are Altoona tested, 12 years, 500,000 miles. We were the first hydrogen fuel cell bus to complete the Altoona testing. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Tim? Yeah. Now you'll forgive me, this is a little bit busy slide, but Tim is a slide Nazi. He held us at 2 slides. On the right, you can see a typical layout for a hydrogen fuel cell bus. Of course, it could vary, but essentially you carry your tanks up above on the roof. You have a battery bank up there, and then you have the cooling infrastructure or cooling system for the bus at the rear of the bus there. Down below where the engine would normally be is where the fuel cell is. And again, the fuel cell essentially takes the hydrogen, breaks it up, and as a result of the hydrogen molecule breaking up, it creates electricity. So the electricity powers the bus, and the waste is actually deionized water. So you can drink the wastewater. You can see the electronics. Again, from the wheels up to the fuel cell, battery bus and a fuel cell bus are the same. From there on, there up is where the power comes from. It'll either come from the fuel cell or from a battery. So very, very similar. The other electric fuel bus. Our bus seats 39 and has 20 standees. And this is just a 1.5 ratio. I'm sure you can crush more folks in the bus, but it's powered by the Ballard FC Velocity HD 85 fuel cell. And with BAE Systems, the hybrid drive system, same as your BAE hybrids would have, same motors and very similar electronics. For battery storage, our base bus has 50 kilowatts of battery. We can option that out to 100 kilowatts. And the importance there is not so much that you're going to get that much more range, but if you have a very hilly terrain, if you have a very aggressive hilly terrain, when you hit a hill or when you want to accelerate very hard, that power will come from the batteries, which is a raw power. Think of the fuel cell as a device that provides very steady, constant level power, and the batteries are the backup, the punch, when you need that added boost. Of course, all the accessories can be electronic. I mean, you could have electric cooling, HVAC, power steering, the air compressors, and even the doors. You could opt out and have pneumatic doors if you still prefer those. I mentioned 60 kilograms at 350 bar, 5,000 PSI. This particular configuration is the Hvip configuration for the state of California, and it is capable of over 300 miles under normal circumstances. Of course, we have to put that little asterisk there. The driver and the environmental conditions are going to affect that range. But by virtue of having more hydrogen or more kilowatts of available power on board, we're not so worried about running the accessories. And then there's some weight and dimensional information below there. Also, last but not least, we have this bus available on the New Mexico State contract, where that's open to other cities, and it will be in the upcoming Washington State DES contract. Thank you very much.
Great overview, Oscar. Thank you very much. We will now move on to Dan Trujillo to tell us about New Flyer's fuel cell electric bus offerings.
Everyone hear me okay? All right, away we go. Hopefully the volume is good. Good morning and good afternoon, of course. I know we've got people beyond the California border on the call. I want to appreciate everything the Ballard team has done to set up these calls and let us educate you a little further on the fuel cell offerings from both Oscar and New Flyer and his team at El Dorado. We really look at presenting the fuel cell in a broader appeal of saying we know the future is coming and it's coming very quickly. Just for an example, I know we're all learning about low-no opportunities today. I do know some of the folks that I work with on the West Coast, including Roland Cordero at Foothill, had kind of seen a glimpse of the future when these folks kind of tiptoe into battery electric buses and they realized there could be range issues that they really weren't ready for. And those range issues are typically when the AC or the heater is run a lot during the day in those inclement weather patterns, where your range on a battery electric bus can go from 200 miles all the way down to 125 by using AC or heat, or maybe a driver that's really not throttling that regeneration that he could get, which makes the fuel cell more of a better play. When you look at the deployments that New Flyer's had, our clients include Orange County Transportation. They have 10 fuel cell buses, 40 footers. Sunline Transit Agencies has, I think, 5 now, and they're also ordering 5 more. They're being built. They should be delivered actually next month. And they're going to be ordering 5 more using some other funding programs as well. So that'll take them up to 15 fuel cell buses. Alameda County Transit, which is AC Transit, their initial order 2 years ago, delivering in 2019, was 10 buses. They're split at 2 garages, 7 at Division 4 and 3 at Division 2. The great news is we are receiving a PO from them next week for 20 additional fuel cells. So they're not just doubling their fleet, they're going to triple their fleet and be our largest fuel cell deployment at 30. I think what AC Transit has done is looking at the fact that being able to change out fuel cell buses as a need means the chargers don't have to go with them. So we do have some of the fuel cell buses that are deployed to different areas further away from their main divisions. Knowing that they have a 300-mile range, they can do that. With electric buses, if you transfer those around to different garages, if you don't have a charger, they're not coming back. So if you have a 30-mile deadhead, and you've lost 30 miles with the heat on, you're almost eliminating half that range on the bus. So I think what AC Transit does when you have more of those spread out garages, they can deploy these buses knowing that at a 300-mile range, they can come back later that night. You look at some of our other clients, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, and we have Golden Empire Transit. That's in Bakersfield, California. They're ordering their first 5. Those are going to be delivered within the next 2 months. And one warning signal, I'll tell everybody on this call, along with battery electric, you want to have your infrastructure in place first. The good thing about a fuel cell bus when it comes to infrastructure is you can deploy a temporary tank system. You can deploy something of a storage unit where the gas can be delivered into a container, and then you can fuel your bus. Unlike battery electric, you could have a temporary charger, but you're going to have to find power from the transformer, the circuits, make sure that your utility company have the power load to put in there, and you're usually cutting concrete or asphalt to get those chargers working. But I would recommend everybody to take a hard look at getting infrastructure piece in place first. And as we continue, I do want to tell you about the California standard. Tim touched on that, and so did Oscar, that we're 10 years ahead of that federal curve. So when you look at what California does in the terms of fuel cells, with the additional 20 for AC Transit, that's 30, we're at 40, so we're at 50, and we should be at 60 fuel cell buses by this time next year. What that's telling you is that we've doubled that amount. Also, to let you know, the regional folks in the middle of the state, so if you're not familiar with California, we call it the Central Valley. So that would be like a Bakersfield, Fresno, San Joaquin, is that since their communities are more spread out rurally, they need that longer range. So we've had low-no letter requests already come in from New Flyer in California. I'm up to about 16 requests to partner with folks. And immediately what I saw this year, I have 9 for fuel cell and 7 for battery electric. Last year, I had 12 for battery and 3 for fuel cell. So there is a shift changing where these middle of the state neighborhoods realize with those longer routes that they simply cannot deploy a battery electric with the range of 150 miles unless they have a charger somewhere else located in a location that may not be secure or may not be available, or if that goes down, they're towing that bus back in. So we're seeing these low-no asks from those more regional, urban type of locations where they need that longer range, which is a good thing for us and a good thing for Oscar as these opportunities unravel. If you do look at the specifics of our bus, our propulsion unit is 160 kilowatts. Our rated torque is about 1,000 pounds per foot. And then the Siemens, we do use a Siemens electric drive system and a ZF axle drive as well. So we do also have a high grade capability motor. You will be asked from either New Flyer or someone else, do you want that high grade motor? My thing would be, if you live in San Francisco, yes. If you're operating on a lot of hills, yes. But I think anything above 8% grade, you may look into that high grade ability motor. A lot of times you can still maintain a decent speed going uphill and recapture some of that energy going back down the hill. But as Roland and anybody with battery electric vehicles can say, that regeneration capture is far more critical on a battery bus than a fuel cell bus. Our battery pack on these buses are 100 kilowatts. So this is a battery driven vehicle, which means we're going to take the energy from the fuel cell, we're going to run it to the battery, it's going to go down, and then we're going to send more energy and it's going to go up. So your drive is coming off the battery, not the fuel cell directly. So we do call this a fuel cell battery electric bus. And when you go into passenger capacity, we can sit up to 40. Our standees are up to 42. And then when you look at the power again, it says up to 50 with one exit, up to 52 with one exit door, up to 73 with one exit door as well. So I don't know if that is our 60 footer or not, but this does come in a 60-foot model as well. We're Altoona tested that we do have one bus deployed at AC Transit in their 60-foot model. The mileage on that bus is around 275 miles fully loaded. So we do offer that model. So if my dogs go crazy, please forgive me. And that's it about that slide. I did include some pricing on the next one, Tim, if you want to do that. So this tells you about our fuel cell and battery layout. There's a lot of verbiage on there. What I don't want to do is kind of recreate the wheel. I think everyone on this phone knows more about buses than me. So you can look at the drawings in specific of how we laid out our fuel cells and also our battery packs. And this is kind of the rough pricing here. When you look at what is the budget of these items, you have to realize that we're talking in the millions here. Even battery electric buses that are fully optioned can reach $1 million for a 40-footer. We always say there's certain agencies where we go, man, that's an expensive bus. When you look at a standard build of a 40-foot electric bus at 825 grand, and when everything is said and done, they're at 980. But we're right at about 1.1 million for a 40-foot bus. I included another 200 grand for options, your CAD AVL, your cameras. A lot of those are standard, and when you switch vendors, that price could increase. The goal in California is to have enough deployment along with Ballard, where if we can get more buses on the road, we're looking at getting that price tag under $1 million. So we do have that vision. Of course, supply and demand, the more you build and the more you stock, the more that price can come down. On the 60-foot vehicle, we start at 1.3, and then again, I add 200 grand for some more gadgets if you want to put it on there. You're going to have more cameras and more technology involved, but that's kind of your basic fundamental pricing rule that you can use. A quick link you can use is we are on the California state contract for DGS, which is, I think, goods and services. We were awarded our 60-foot and 40-foot, and the pricing is right there for everybody to look at. If you have any questions in particular, I can send you those files for pricing. We will also be on the state of Washington as well, along with Oscar's team. So I did note the mileage range at 290 to 350 miles. If you get up to 350, you might be crawling on that last 100 kilograms or kilowatts of power, limping that vehicle home. But if we have routes longer than 325, I would be surprised. A New Flyer is also partnered with MCI, which is our sister company, and will also be coming out with a fuel cell coach model and a fuel cell battery electric coach model. So as we look at the future for New Flyer as a group, and we look at this low-no funding, in California, it's a mixed bag, simply because there was one award last year, and it was infrastructure for Antelope Valley. When you see all the folks that put their time into applying for low-no grants, is it an act of fruition? Is it an act of slow demise of putting all this work together? We don't think so this year. We think that the Biden administration has kind of loosened the reins a little bit more in hoping to base this on population centers rather than every state gets one or two. So we're hopeful that the time you put in with the low-no makes a lot of sense. And I know there's some questions in the chat room. I could take a look at it. Or we can save the questions for later. But I also want to make everyone aware, and this will help Oscar too, is the HVIP program. And that's in California Central, to take a real hard look at that for funding wise. That's a certain amount per bus. For a fuel cell bus, it's $240,000. That's a nice chunk of change to get knocked off there. So I think I took up my 6 minutes of internet fame, but I can answer any questions either now or after. That can be based on how Tim wants to approach that. But thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dan. That was a great overview and a good sneak peek at both HVIP and the upcoming motor coaches. We'll do questions and answers at the end, but I can see that there's some coming in already on the chat. So we've heard about the buses and all the different offerings there, and the natural question that comes next is, of course, the fuel. And we're really lucky today to have a representative from Air Liquide. Jordan's going to tell us a little bit about what you can do for fuel, the different options that Air Liquide offers, and how those can fit your operations. Jordan, take it away, please.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you all for your time today. As Tim mentioned, I'm Jordan Truitt, business developer for Air Liquide Hydrogen Energy. Air Liquide, just real quick, is probably the biggest company none of you have ever heard of, unless you've talked to me or one of my colleagues in the past. We're in everything from Dippin' Dots to the fuel you put in your vehicles. So we're based out of Paris, France. We've got over 70,000 employees globally, and we are one of the founding members of the Hydrogen Council, which is the big driving force globally for hydrogen as an energy transition molecule. I'm going to talk to you briefly about the different modes of hydrogen production and delivery, as it would pertain to your particular use of it. We are somewhat technology agnostic at Air Liquide. We run, own, and operate, and design and build everything from small SMRs that are used on site to large SMRs that are, major production units. Same thing with electrolysis. We just recently started up our Bécancour, Canada electrolyzer, which is the world's largest proton exchange membrane electrolyzer in Bécancour, Canada. We're also in the process of building a 30-ton per day liquid hydrogen production facility in North Las Vegas. That is being built to supply the mobility market in California. So getting into how hydrogen is produced, you've really got a couple options as it pertains to you using it in your buses. So you can have off-site production where that hydrogen is produced away from your facility and then delivered, or you can have on-site production. Hydrogen is always produced as a gas, so it can either be produced on site as a gas via electrolysis or on-site SMR, or it can be produced off-site as a gas and delivered as a gas in both high pressure and what we call low pressure tube trailers. The other option is turning that gas that's produced off-site into a liquid, and then that liquid is delivered. And one other consideration is pipeline hydrogen. If you're in close proximity to a pipeline, that is a very cost-effective way to receive that hydrogen. However, the cost of running a pipeline or connecting a pipeline can be somewhat prohibitive. So some things to consider, and I'll talk about the first bullet a little bit in more detail. And that's the long-term plan for your fleet conversion. So as you're thinking about applying for LONO or any other grant funding, it's good to think about your long-term transition plan. If you're going to have more than the handful of buses that you're initially going to order, think about asking for the funding to be able to do larger infrastructure construction. Maybe not buying the equipment, but putting in the conduit and some of the other required utilities to grow that fueling station as you add buses and more equipment to it. Also consider your proximity to supply. If you're very far away from a pipeline, it might not necessarily be cost effective for you to think about connecting and supplying via pipeline. Liquid is a bit of a wild card because it is highly transportable. Some other considerations are station footprint and size constraints, especially if you're looking at electrolysis or an on-site SMR. And then also consider the additional site modifications that you're going to need. If you have CNG buses, for example, your maintenance facility will likely need some modifications to meet NFPA code for hydrogen. When I talk about scalability and resiliency, I'm sure everybody in California can speak to some of the supply issues the market has had over the last 5 years with fuel cell vehicles, light duty side primarily. So think about that as you build out your plan for hydrogen. The other is capital and cost and operating costs. So we've all seen the curve where the infrastructure starts to line out or at least become on par with battery electric required infrastructure as you start scaling up. So consider that as you add more buses to it. You don't necessarily need to continue adding capital to a fueling station. A lot of times there's excess capacity built in. And then the last thing I'll talk about is the resiliency, is the hydrogen economy in general where you're located. So if you decide to go with liquid or on-site, can you leverage overproduction at your location to sell to the fuel cell market in a retail scenario and basically leverage the energy that you're putting into the molecules. Next slide. So at Air Liquide, we've got, again, experience with all of them. We've got, small electrolyzers we're running on site. We're doing the same thing with SMRs in California. Our recommendation for transit opportunities is to go with liquid first. Liquid hydrogen is easily scalable. We've designed a system that goes from 15 buses or fewer. Then by adding a marginally more equipment, you can go to 25 all the way up to 50. We recommend using the largest tank that we have, which is roughly 15 to 18,000 gallons. That way you don't have to swap that tank out as you start to scale up. The other thing that liquid affords is cost-effective resiliency or redundancy built into the system. So adding redundant pumps, so you have increased reliability. Then you can look at on the efficiency side, adding things like a boil-off gas compressor to capture the losses that you have from that liquid sitting there. Maybe as you scale up, the demand that you're using is not quite as high. So utilizing that gas as it's being boiled off to put in your buses. In addition, there's dual simultaneous dispensing. And again, the footprint. I have yet to talk to many people in California who are not concerned, especially about their footprint and the location that they're going to put this fueling station. So looking at the different technologies based on your available footprint. So based on our approach, scaling with liquid, we offer the 15 bus station for roughly 1.7 million. As you scale up, the 25 bus station, if you were to go with that one initially, is 2.4 million. And then as you can see on the slide, 3.4 for a 50 bus. Now I will note, when you go from a 15 to a 25, you're not investing the full 2.4 million. Again, you're basically just adding the incremental equipment to bring that 15 bus station up to the 25. For comparison's sake, I've shown what it would look like for electrolysis. So as you can see, a 50 bus station with electrolyzer is about 20 million, and then just under 30 million for 100 bus. I will say on electrolyzer versus on-site SMR, electrolyzers are typically easier to run. They're also a bit more forgiving on maintenance. The issue really comes into those is on the power requirement. A rule of thumb that we use is about 55 to 60 kilowatt hours per kilogram produced. The other thing to factor in is your water requirement. So there is quite a bit of water needed. Below the writing is a map of all the liquid sources across the country. I will say there are more liquid sources being produced or built now and being announced. We see liquid, for the mobility market as being a primary driver to scale. And then as we start scaling up, we're looking at adding more and more sources. And again, we're here to help. You can use Air Liquide and myself to be more specific as a resource. If you have questions about, which way to go or what might fit your application, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. That was a great overview. Lots of great options, and the hydrogen story is evolving day by day. So do stay tuned in to all the latest developments in this field. Now we get to the main event, what we've all been waiting for. Very pleased to introduce to you Sydney Kruger from KTC and sales representative from Ballard. Sydney, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. We're really excited that you're all here, and I'm very excited to talk to you a little bit about the low-no application process and how you can write a low-no for fuel cell buses. So essentially, the low-no program is providing funding for the purchase or lease of zero emissions buses, as well as the acquisition and construction of facilities to fuel these buses. I think the exciting thing about the program is that to date, over 409 million has been awarded to 203 projects in the US. I think what everyone on this call is excited about this year is that this is the 6th year of funding, and that we have actually the largest funding amount ever that they've released, which is 180 million. That is 50 million above what we were awarded last year. So a big grant, lots of opportunity to fund fuel cell electric bus projects. Tim, next slide, please. So once again, these are key dates for everyone to keep in mind. If you missed the FTA webinar where they went over the application process, it is recorded, and I can send you a recording of that presentation after this. Keep in mind that we have an extra month this year to submit low-no applications. We have until April 12th is when applications are due. Your project will be evaluated between April and May, and the awards will come out on who was awarded the low-no in summer of 2021. I think something else to keep in mind is that you do have up to 3 years to use the funds. So if you're thinking and are interested in fuel cell buses and fueling, but you want to do it in the future, you do have up until 2024. If you decided to put in a fuel cell loan-o application this year, you have until 2024 to use those funds. The FTA does like to see that you will use them within a year and does award more points if you will do so, but you do have the opportunity up until 3 years to use those funds. Next slide, please, Tim. So what we wanted to give you an idea here was an idea of average size of award, and then also past awards, what those look like and what their dollar amounts were, to kind of give you a basis and what type of budget you should look at submitting. So if we look at that chart on the left, the low-no average award size over the last 4 years, you can see that trending upwards. So from 2016, awards in like the $2 to $3 million range, moving up to 2020, where Las Vegas was awarded the $5 million range. So we're excited to see that the average award size is increasing. And then if you look at the chart on the right, we look at the last awards that were awarded for fuel cell bus low-no projects. We look at Sunline, Champaign-Urbana, SARTA, and Las Vegas, and you can see the average awards there and the size of them. So just to keep in mind also that any of these low-no awards, you can petition the FTA for a copy of the application that was submitted, the ones that successfully won, to kind of help you draft what your application should look like. Next slide, please, Tim. So I wanted to go through a little bit about eligible, if you're eligible, and then also about cost sharing. So once again, eligible applicants are any state, local government, or federally recognized tribe are all eligible. Rural areas, you do need to submit as part of a consolidated state application. And then you can list project partners. So the low-no competitive selection process actually satisfies the requirement for a competitive procurement. So this is a way to kind of speed up a project. Instead of having to go out for competitive award for each piece of the project, you're able to list partners such as New Flyer, El Dorado, Air Liquide, Ballard in your application. On top of that, for cost sharing. So remember that these are not just for the vehicles for the grant, but it's also for fueling and facilities. So for the vehicles, it's an 85% federal share and a 15% non-federal or local. For the equipment or facilities, it's a 90% federal and a 10% local share. And for workforce development, it's 80 federal and 20% non-federal. Something to note from years past was that the FTA would give increased points or consideration to applications that gave a higher percentage of local match. Due to COVID and operational challenges in terms of dollars and less ridership, they have taken that away. So there is no increased benefit for you giving or providing a higher percentage of local share. So that should help in terms of financing some of these low-nos in terms of how much your agency needs to provide. So keep in mind that for the buses, you can keep that 85-15 match there. And for the facilities, the 90-10. Next slide, Tim. So eligible projects to fund. So remember, once again, I've said this a couple times, but just to remind you, this is an amazing grant because it doesn't just fund one or the other. It funds your complete holistic project. So it will fund the buses for purchase or lease for low or no emissions used for public transportation. It will fund either leasing or buying the facilities to fuel the buses, and it will fund rehabbing the facilities to service fuel cell buses, as well as workforce development. So workforce development could be training on the fuel cell power module, on the bus itself, or it can even be a trip to the Hydrogen Center of Excellence at Sunline to see how their electrolyzer is running, or to get training there. So keep that in mind. Next slide, Tim. In terms of how you're going to be evaluated, there's a couple key factors I want you to keep in mind of how to win and how your application will be scored favorably. Most of that goes through demonstration of need, so that you need the project for an unmet capital investment, evidence of that need, a demonstration of benefits, so how it's going to support to reduce energy consumption, to reduce harmful emissions, to reduce CO2 emissions. You need to talk about your planning and local prioritization, so how it's consistent with your local and long-range planning. Also project implementation. So how is the project going to be implemented, and how is it going to be obligated? And then show them that you have technical, legal, financial capacity to bring forth the project, that you know how to carry it out in terms of a technical standpoint, and then show your local financial commitment. What's nice there is that VW money can be used as your local match. So that's something good also to keep in mind. Next slide, Tim. Two big things for 2021 that I want everyone to keep in mind that are two areas that are new for this year and will help your application look more favorable is one, non-attainment or maintenance areas, and two, environmental justice. So for one, the FDA wants to see how the proposed service area that these fuel cell buses were run in have to do with that they're in a non-attainment area. So an area that has pollution via carbon monoxide, ozone, particulate matter 2.5, and particulate matter 10. So you need to highlight that. You also need to highlight environmental justice. So we need to look at the proposed service area that the fuel cell buses are going in and explain how those are going to improve the population of low income and minority populations. Those include Native American, Asian, African American, Hispanic, and Native Hawaiian. So those two pieces definitely should be highlighted in this year's application. Next slide, Tim. Tim, can you move on to the next slide? There we go. Oh, I think that's actually the last slide. So just to keep in mind with your application, Ballard does have a team on hand ready and able to help you write this year's LONO. So we can provide that team to you if needed. So please just either email myself or Tim. Our emails will be at the end slide here, and we can work on crafting the application and submitting it, partnering with you before the April 12th deadline. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Sydney. Lots of good information there. Again, we can get you this presentation. We can get you any information you need by emailing. And furthermore, we can do it live right now. We're going to ask our panel to come back, turn on their video and unmute their mics, please. If you'd like to ask a question now, please do. We've got some questions in the chat, but if you'd like to do it live, if you can raise a hand either visually or use your reactions to put up a hand, we'll do our best to call on you. As I said, we try to keep this fairly intimate with a limited number of people. We do have 50 people that have joined us for today's discussion. So really happy to speak to anyone and any questions you may have. If I miss you, just go ahead and butt in, just unmute yourself and say, hey, I got a question. I'm going to go ahead and start with one of the questions that came up in the chat from Lillian at WSP. Can you speak to the total life cycle emissions of fuel cell electric vehicles versus diesel versus battery electric bus? Not green hydrogen, which is hard to obtain, but SMR produced hydrogen fuel. So it's a really good question. Now, as we know, CNG buses have a more favorable profile than diesel buses. So looking at a comparison to a CNG bus is something that was recently done by NREL, and their report will be coming out through the DOE here within the next few weeks. Do look for that. It's a great report. You're looking at, for the vehicles themselves, about twice the fuel economy for energy that actually gets to the road in a fuel cell electric bus compared to a CNG bus. And then if you're steam methane reforming that same starting molecule from methane, you're getting about 2/3 of that out. So putting that through, you're looking at least a 30% benefit from fuel cell electric buses for sheer carbon emissions compared to a CNG bus, even if you're starting with a fossil methane source. And of course, you don't have any tailpipe emissions for criterion pollutants such as NOx. I would highly recommend that you do talk to your fuel supplier and see if you can get renewable content into your fuel mix. It's becoming more and more common and costs are driving down. So do look for trying to get carbon-free hydrogen. We look to see it becoming the dominant form of hydrogen for transportation as we move forward. Any other comments on that from the panel?
No, I would just, the only thing that I'll add is the majority of our production that is for mobility is being produced using renewable natural gas. So we are trying to bring the carbon emissions down, or the CO2 emissions down, even in conventional SMR production.
And I'll also add that we try and do our best also to match grid parity. So whatever renewable content in your state is coming from renewable sources, we like to match that same percentage with what percentage of hydrogen will be coming from RNG, and that's in your state.
Yeah, please do keep in mind, and we say this a lot, that hydrogen is an energy carrier, just like electricity. And just like electricity, it's as green as your source is. So please think about that as you're planning out your operations and fulfilling your carbon mandates. I see another question in the chat here. Is this total cost of project or low-no share? That's from Young Park.
Yeah, Tim,
go ahead.
I can answer that one.
Go
So
ahead,
I think that FTA graph that we showed was FTA funds and not total cost of project when we showed what the FTA was awarding.
Great, thank you. Other questions? We have about 9 minutes left.
We also do want to repeat the answer. So we got a question if this would be recorded and if we would be able to email a link to the presentation after, and we are recording it and we can email it to you. So anyone that wasn't able to attend today from your transit agency or organization, they can watch this later at a later date.
Great, thank you, Sydney. We had another question about fuel cell trains. Fuel cells for bus and rail facilities, fuel cell buses and fuel cell trains. As Sydney mentioned, San Bernardino is going to be starting their Redlands passenger rail. They've already had approval for a fuel cell train for that line. And we know that CalSTA and Caltrans very interested in fuel cell electric trains. We've got projects starting up in Canada and also quite a few in Europe as well as in China. So that's another opportunity to really multiply the benefit of hydrogen fueling resources when you've got conjoined facilities like rail and bus together. Had some questions about pricing, not to be too surprising. I think that was addressed by our presenters from El Dorado and from New Flyer, looking at competitive prices against battery buses. And of course, you know, the prices for diesel hybrids also. We see prices hitting parity somewhere around the middle to the end of the decade. CARB has similar projections as well. Most of that will come from scaling. Some of the numbers that we showed for the Innovative Clean Transit will really drive up our production costs. The fuel cell costs have come down up until now from technology increases, but our production capability is increasing sixfold, and trucks actually and other market segments will help to drive down those prices for the fuel cells as well for the fuel itself. So we see a lot of multiplying effects as hydrogen is looked towards as a zero carbon energy source.
Yeah, and for pricing, we generally say that you can look at state contracts that are already out to use that pricing as your budgetary price in the low-no application in the budget section. So under the California DGS that Dan talked about, the fuel cell bus is listed at 1.017 with options. We say to put around 1.2. Oscar might be able to speak to the El Dorado bus, what that budgetary number is, but the state contracts that you can currently put for a fuel cell bus and buy one off of today is California DGS, New Mexico, and state of Washington. So keep that in mind. And also either El Dorado or New Flyer can provide a letter of support as well as budgetary pricing in your low-no application for fuel cell buses.
Absolutely. As mentioned, we are on the New Mexico state contract and the upcoming Washington state contract. Budgetary pricing of 1.2 million is a good number to use. As Dan mentioned, you know, that includes cameras and, you know, other equipment. Maybe not everything you want, but a well-equipped bus for that price. And that compares very favorably with the max battery capacity, say, Proteras, that are topping $1 million because of the cost of batteries.
Tim, looks like we have a question about partnering. Do you want to read that question out loud, or do you want me to?
I'll go for it.
So let's see, Jason asks, thanks for the information. Has Ballard attempted to partner with the State Department of Transportation for Low-No grants? For example, a DOT-sponsored application may be more competitive at the FTA level than a smaller rural transit agency that does not have the resources to steward a cutting-edge fuel cell bus project. Additionally, smaller agencies may be uncertain about the cost, benefit, feasibility of fuel cell bus technology in general. Tim, do you want to take that one?
I'd like to, but I haven't heard that approach before. It's pretty interesting. I am not sure if that's afforded to partner up with state agencies for a low-no application. If anybody else in the panel has heard of that, we will look into it. Generally, Ballard is not directly involved in an application. It's one of our OEMs. Eldorado, New Flyer will be part of what goes into the application. Sydney, do you have any perspectives on that?
Yeah, well, Ballard can be listed in the application as a project partner too. And what we do know for rural agencies that they do have to list, they do have to submit a consolidated application. In California, CalSTART does help put together those applications. So in Colorado, that might be some sort of similar group that puts together for the rural agencies. But that's a good question, and also a good kind of strategy, you know, to join together multiple agencies to submit an application.
Yeah, thanks, Sydney. Sydney's definitely the expert in this. She's put through several low-no applications for fuel cell buses, so she's a good resource to reach out to.
So it looks like Lillian asked, do you assist grant applications with demonstration of benefits? So yeah, the team that helps write on Ballard's behalf, where we help write the low-nos, we do help with the demonstration of benefit. That's definitely a major part of the application. And then from Tierno, the question was, is it safe to have H2 vehicles parked beside electric buses and or diesel buses on the same facility? Dan, do you want to answer that about AC Transit and the electric New Flyer buses parked by the fuel cell buses?
Sure. I mean, you guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
So there's no issue at all. You know, fuel cell buses have certain garage requirements to make sure you can aerate the garage at any given time. At AC Transit, they have like quick release buttons for the garage to open and vacate anything if there's an anomaly. You know, we've been in the business for quite a long time. We have not seen anything regarding cell R tanks that would have New Flyer take a really straightforward cautionary approach. It seems like all the rules and guidelines listed from Ballard are followed very easily, and parking a battery electric bus next to a fuel cell poses no problems whatsoever. Those batteries on the electric buses are self-contained in tubs. They're sealed. There should be no sparking or arcing whatsoever. And to ignite anything in a fuel cell is just highly unlikely, simply because it's so sealed and contained. We find the Ballard fuel cell, we call it the bulletproof piece on the bus. There's almost no need to open it unless it's maybe for a midlife overhaul or to recycle it. We don't see the need. So to answer your questions, we have no issue at all if there's a battery bus next to a fuel cell bus.
And there's some really great characteristics of hydrogen that have really good comparative safety qualities. When you look at it compared to CNG, it's non-toxic. Compared to diesel, it floats away. It doesn't create vapors that pool. And you know, all the energy, all the power that happens in the fuel cell module is with a very small amount of fuel. Most of the energy is contained in the tanks on the roof. So if there ever were to be an issue, that energy is safely stored away from where the power is produced. So in fact, there's a lot of good reasons to say that fuel cell buses actually have positive safety aspects compared to other technologies.
Tim, one other thing real quick. There are other industries using fuel cells. For example, the forklift market. There are hundreds of hydrogen forklift applications where they are fueling the forklifts indoors on a 24-hour basis. And the number of incidents is very, very few and infrequent because of the molecule itself, but also the safety protocols and mechanisms that are designed into all the systems. So it's a very safe molecule.
It looks like, Tim, there was a question about why Vancouver, British Columbia wasn't on Jordan's map in terms of hydrogen production at scale. And it looks like we answered that, but wanted to remind everyone that there are strategic positions for large scale hydrogen production from the different industrial gas companies across the US. Those locations are Sacramento, California, Ontario, California, Las Vegas, Nevada will be up at the end of this year, New Orleans, Louisiana, Sarnia, Ontario, LaPorte, Texas, East Chicago, Indiana, Niagara Falls, New York, McIntosh, Alabama, Bécancour, Canada. So those are the locations. If you're close to those, at least 1,000 miles from those, we do recommend liquefied or liquid supply. If you aren't, there are other locations that will be coming up in the next year or two. But if you aren't close to those locations, then we do recommend on-site production via your own steam methane reformer or own electrolyzer, like both Champaign-Urbana and Sunline and AC Transit has done.
One real quick note on that, Sydney. So the map that I posted was the liquid sources. However, that's not to say that that's not all, as Sydney mentioned, the only sources of hydrogen, across the country and into Canada. What I would do is probably reach out to a hydrogen supplier, myself or one of my competitors, and ask the question, what is in close proximity to my facility? And that's usually the best way to, to gauge what would be a path forward. Then look at your utility costs. What are you paying for natural gas? How much footprint do you have? What are you paying for electricity? And then, and companies like mine can help you work through some of these or navigate some of these questions and issues with, how you're going to implement hydrogen at your facility.
Looks like we had a question here about fire suppression systems installed in fuel cell buses. So from what we know, Kidde fire suppression system does have a hydrogen sensor similar to the CNG sensor. I do not believe that Amerex has that same special hydrogen sensor that has been built, but that they may or may not. But we do know that Kidde does have that, and we do recommend that to be on the hydrogen buses. Dan, any?
As a matter of fact, the Eldorado bus is equipped with an Amerex system.
Okay.
Safety net hydrogen gas detection.
Perfect.
And there's sensors throughout the system and the tanks and the fuel cell. And as mentioned earlier, hydrogen gas, 30 times lighter than air. So if there is a leak, the gas is going straight up. It's not going to drape around the bus and hang around.
Yeah, and for Roland's questions about what is the price point that'll drive the bus down, we're pretty darn close, right? So when you look at the California DGS contract as a base, they're asking us to extend the contract a little longer, and we're going to take a position of checking if there's a feasibility we can do to lower any pricing. Right now with our volume, our bigger orders from AC Transit, Bakersfield and Sunline are getting us close to that 100 bus count. But we're interested maybe by the time Foothill is ready to enter the market, we can take a real hard look at the quantity breaks for a Foothill. Right now, we don't have a lot of quantity breaks because the orders have been so small, 5 here, 10 here, 5 there. So when we start quoting a bigger order, we would like as a manufacturer, just like a CNG or a hybrid, to say, look, we should have different pricing from 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and above 20, something a little more aggressive. So we're willing to look at every individual transit agency for that pricing.
Well, and Dan, on the DGS contract, there are volume level discounts.
Yep.
For, I believe it's from 1 to 15, from 15 to 20. I can't remember exactly the grouping there, but there are volume discounts listed on the state contract.
Yep.
And then looks like another question, Jordan, maybe for you. Are hydrogen providers open to partnering with agencies in terms of developing and installing fuel cell stations?
Certainly. So Air Liquide is open to anything around partnering. I mean, we're interested again in the overall hydrogen economy. So, how can we use hydrogen to help transition, do the energy transition? So absolutely, we're open to it. We're also open to, exploring other technologies and avenues that you might be interested in beyond just liquid delivered.
All right, well, we're getting to a little bit past our scheduled time. We're happy to stay on the line. Myself and most of the panel will be sticking around until people drop off, but do keep putting in your questions. Feel free to voice them out loud or stick them in the chat, and we'll stick around as long as you want to stick around.
Yeah, I think our goal of this was to help inform you about the low-no application, to help inform you what it would look like to write a low-no for fuel cell buses, and to let you know that this is a perfect opportunity to get funding for not only buses, but also the fueling facility and also maintenance to your facility to service fuel cell buses and training. So this is a really holistic grant. We have heard from the FTA that they do want to award more and be a little bit more balanced towards fuel cell and electric applications, and that they are highly considering awarding more than just one application or award to per state. So we're hoping that there'll be more awarded to each state, and that more and more applications will win, considering we have $50 million this year. So any other questions, feel free to stay on and ask. We'll hear for it.
All right, we'll give it just a couple more minutes, but
to do a buy one, get one when the volume hits. So Roland, maybe we could do a BOGO for you.
Well, the fact of the matter is that they're cost drivers to the price of the bus. And the larger cost drivers come from the batteries, the fuel cell, the hydrogen tank system. And those are common components that we all use. So when that market begins to sift down in pricing, you'll gain the advantages from all OEMs.
yeah, and it's a matter of scale. I mean, you've seen it on batteries, right? As the automotive EVs have really propagated, they've driven down cell costs from mass manufacturing, and we're seeing it in the fuel cell area as well. Like I mentioned, we're increasing our automation by 6-fold, and trucks and trains and boats will all help scale to drive down those costs. And we'll finally see, production volume discounts. Our cost out so far have been only by technology gains, and we're just starting to see those kind of production volume cost discounts. So I think across the value chain, we're going to see real improvements very soon.
Yeah, and not only that, the components are getting smaller, they're getting more efficient. So it's a win-win really for our industry.
All right, last call for questions. All right, well, once again, as Sydney mentioned, there's 50 million more in the kitty this year. They're putting a new focus on fuel cell electric buses, and they're really looking at fleet scaling where fuel cell electric buses are most appropriate. So do reach out. Do consider fuel cell buses for your FTA low-no applications, and best of luck. Thank you to everyone on the panel, Oscar and Jordan and Dan and Sydney. It's been a real pleasure presenting all the benefits of fuel cell electric buses and helping you guys to get them into your fleet and use some of that federal funding.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.